Hi, Amazon sellers. Once again, this is Chris McCabe with e-commerce Chris, and I'm here with Leah McHugh.
Hi.
We're consulting Amazon sellers and creating videos like this to educate people on how to stay out of Amazon's crosshairs and how to troubleshoot problems they have from enforcement teams, especially
Right.
policy enforcement.
We help suspended sellers, but we much prefer helping sellers before they're suspended.
Yes.
It makes it much easier for everybody.
This video will be 100% dedicated to avoiding a suspension, and we'll probably do another one about how to handle a suspension around these kinds of problems.
In case you missed this one.
Yes, around documentation, supply chain documentation, and verifiable suppliers. So make sure, and I've said this many times in many formats at this point, but there are still loads of sellers contacting me every day who don't have invoices for the items that they're listing. And they also don't have website links to show for their suppliers or even know which supplier it is. If they're drop shippers, they don't have the invoices or the supplier information until there's an order. The problem is, we've heard from a lot of sellers who are suspended before there are orders for inauthentic, potential counterfeit,
Or even
notice
just for
infringement.
verification purposes if you're a newer
Verification
seller.
now, yeah. A lot of the verification language isn't just about a utility bill anymore or showing your bank statements and business address. It's show us your supply chain documentation.
Show us invoices for the last 90 days.
Right. So what does this mean? It means they're trying to get sellers earlier in the cycle before they even list things, or right after you list something, suspend you at least temporarily until you can show these are our suppliers, this is our documentation, we have invoices. Hopefully you also have authenticity letters or agreements with the brands you're selling, the manufacturers you're sourcing from. Take this very seriously, because the golden age of drop shipping or buying from liquidators who don't have line item invoices, whatever you might be doing, that golden age is long gone. And Leah and I understand that some sellers might be visible on the site today who are sourcing, presumably sourcing that way, and are only drop shipping.
Sure, of course.
At any given moment, there'll be any number of drop shippers on the site.
It's just a lot more of a dangerous business model at this point.
Right.
It's fine until it's not fine. And we're seeing more and more incidences where
Right.
it's not fine anymore because you can't give the documentation that Amazon's asking for.
Right. Acceptable enough to, I mean, they're really aggressive and they're very strict. They're more strict this year than we've seen in prior months even, in terms of how verifiable is your supplier. Let's forget about invoices for a second. Does your supplier have a website? If they don't, please don't buy from them. This is a major criterion for Amazon investigators who are looking to reject an invoice, reject a supplier. Make sure they have a website. Make sure that you can give a phone number. They're calling people way more now than they were last year.
A direct email address, not just service at,
Right.
like an actual person's personal inbox, ideally.
If you were doing
Same with the phone number, ideally. An
direct
actual
dial
direct
phone number to a person, you give their name, you give their title. Err on the side of giving more detail on who they should contact, who they should speak with, even down to, is there an extension for that person instead of an 800 number? Don't just give a general 800 number. Don't forget to add the phone number, add an email address, add the title of the person who's your sales manager.
I think the thing to remember is Amazon's investigators aren't going to keep calling your supplier to verify. You have one shot with them calling. So that one phone call needs to be fruitful. Otherwise, they'll say it's not verifiable.
Right. Otherwise, you're pushing them, please call them again. And you're putting that in an escalation or an appeal
Which
to
they
get an
may
ASIN
or may not
reinstated.
do.
They might do it. They might have said you had your chance. Err on the same as when you're registering a brand new account. You err on the side of giving them more, not less. But don't just give them extraneous information that they never asked for. Make sure you're giving them exactly what they want. When they ask for invoices, don't show them something from a liquidator that has barely any information on it.
Well, and I think that's key. So what information needs to be on an invoice for it to be acceptable by Amazon?
Quantity, the date has to be within 365 days. You have to have a description, not just a photo. A lot of Chinese invoices have a picture of the item, but without a SKU or a part number.
Right.
That's another thing that people are not understanding enough, and it's getting them into hot water. Description of the product, quantities, and at this point,
It also can't say purchase order or order confirmation. If
Right.
it says anything, it has to say invoice.
It can't
not
say-
pro forma invoice, just invoice.
and not commercial invoice.
commercial.
Not pro forma, not commercial. We're still seeing tons of invoices that have it stamped right on there. What you're doing is giving the investigator the excuse to ignore the entire thing, throw it away, and send you a rejection letter, simply because you didn't know that it couldn't be pro forma. So also make sure that the link for their website is right on the invoice if possible, the address for the suppliers there, all of this information because they're doing an online search to verify it.
And the buyer information needs to match your seller account. So
that's
you
right.
can't have some other random person's information on your invoice. It needs to match your
Seller
seller
Central.
information in Seller Central.
Yeah. Address, company name. Don't take any chances with, random DBA. I mean, that is something that you can remedy maybe in the appeals process if they reject you, but why take that chance if they're taking a quick look at it? The buyer information has to match Seller Central. The seller information that you give on the invoice has to match what they will find online in an independent search to consider that supplier verifiable. And of course, don't monkey around with invoices. Don't be accused of fabricating, editing.
Please don't fake invoices. It's not worth it.
All you can do is redact the price. Draw a line through it, scratch it out. Don't do anything that looks like Photoshop or that makes it look like you edited something. We get people all the time telling us, well, all we did was change this, this, or this. Obviously, if you're changing the dates, you're committing fraud, right? You're altering a document and lying about when you bought the product.
Right.
But don't do anything else as well. Just take out the prices. I think that's pretty much everything.
Yeah, we actually have an article on this, which we can link to below the video, because I realize we just threw a whole bunch of information at you. We have a step-by-step list of what needs to be in your documentation, so we'll link that below in case you weren't able to follow along with us.
Right. We had to do it quickly. We can't talk for 10, 15 minutes about invoices and suppliers.
As much as we'd like to.
Without sounding like we're nagging you, but there are other resources that we can offer where you can read it in text form instead of listening to this. We're just seeing tons of people who are still having these problems, and we're trying to
Well, and so much of this is
reduce
avoidable. So we'd rather have
Right.
you avoid the situation before your business is shut down,
Right.
rather than trying to remedy it after. So
We know there's courses, there's YouTube videos. We understand this content's out there that's encouraging you to use these business models that we think are old, outdated, not so useful sourcing models. We know people used to do all these things, but what happened in the past versus how aggressively and strictly enforcement is now are two totally different worlds. So for 2020, we're just trying to get people to turn the page on that and focus on these preventative measures. So
any questions, post them below. We're here to answer. We're here to help.
Happy New Year. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening.